maybe I want to say a responsibility to also create incentives for people to do high effort, empathetic debate versus throwing poop at each other.
Yeah. I think those are two slightly different things, so I agree. I think that my view is that the failure of Facebook and Twitter and others in recent years has been that they have been completely untransparent about their rules. So what I would think would advance us is if they had a set of rules that were clear, that were consistently followed, and we understood what they were. That would also tell us as consumers what the biases are, how to understand what's going on. It seems, if I might say, that since Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, it's been arbitrary in who's thrown off and who's not thrown off. And that's a real problem. Arbitrariness is in some ways the opposite of democracy.
But there's also a hidden arbitrariness in interpretation of the rules. So, for example, what comment incites violence? That's really, really difficult to figure out to me. Like, there's a gray area. Obviously, there's very, very clear versions of that. But if I know anything about people that try to incite violence, they're usually not coming out and clearly saying it. They're usually kind of dog whistling it. And same with racism and anti-Semitism, all of that. It's usually dog whistles. Mm-hmm. So and they usually have fun playing with the rules, playing around the rules. So it's a gray area. Same with during COVID, misinformation. What's misinformation, right?
I agree. And some of these are age-old problems. Our legal system, common law, has been struggling with what is incitement to violence since the first Supreme Court decisions in the 18th century, right? So you're absolutely right. But I will say this. There are certain things that are clearly incitement to violence. I'll give you very clear examples. I'll just make it personal, right? My wife is an elected official here in Austin. There have been people who have put things up on Twitter calling for her to be hanged or calling for her to be attacked. That's incitement to violence. Yeah. When you specifically call for violence against someone, I agree. There's a lot of other stuff where it's a gray area, but we could start, if we're applying these rules, by getting that material off of these sites.
So some of that is a problem of scale too, but the gray area is still a forever problem that we may never be able to solve, and maybe the tension within the gray area is the very process of democracy. But saying we need to take our country back. Is that incitement of violence?
I don't think that. I think we need to take our country back. Just that? No.
But then,
because I might say that. I might say we need to take our...
I say that all the time. I go, again, I walk around drunk just screaming that at everybody.
I thought you wanted us to take you back.
Exactly. I was very confused. My messaging needs to work.
But let's go to the January 6th example, right? To say hang Mike Pence, that's incitement to violence.
Yeah.
To say go get Nancy, that's incitement to violence.
Yeah, it's very clear. I don't think that's the big problem. The big problem is the gray area. But yet, and the other problem is just how to technically find the large scale of comments and posts and so on that are doing this kind of clear incitement of violence.
For you to solve. You're the
I understand.
I mean, don't ask me those questions.
Well, I have to say, some of that is motivation, some of that is vision, and some of that is execution.
Yes.
So, for example, just to go out briefly on a dark topic, something I've recently became aware of is Facebook and Twitter and so on. People post violence on there, like videos of violence, child porn, some of the darkest things in this world. And to find them at scale is a difficult problem. And to act on it aggressively is a difficult problem. But I think part of this motivation, like saying this is a big problem, we need to take this on, we need to find all the darkest aspects of human nature that rise and appear on our platform and remove them so that we can create a place for humanity to flourish through the process of conversation. But it's just hard. It's just really hard. When you look at millions of posts, trillions of interactions, it's wild what's the amount of data.
But where we are now with social media seemed wild and impossible 5 years ago, right?
Yes.
I actually, what frustrates me is I think there are people who have politicized this issue in unnecessary ways. Everyone, regardless of their politics, should support what you just said. Investing our money, maybe grants from the federal government, in AI skilled people like you figuring out ways to get violent videos off of there. That shouldn't be political.
Well, some of that also requires being transparent from a social media company perspective. and transparent in a way that really resists being political. To be able to be transparent about your fight against these evils while still not succumbing to the sort of the political narratives of it. That's tricky, but you have to do that kind of and like walk calmly through the fire, because that's what Twitter feels like if you're being political. It's like a firing squad from every side, and as a leader you have to kind of walk calmly.
Right, and that is where we need a new generation of people who will have diverse politics, but will stand up against that, right? I mean, that's the lesson from after the Civil War is where progress is made. The war doesn't solve problems of hate. Where progress is made is where you have local leaders and others who stand up and say, we can differ, but we're going to stop calling people from certain backgrounds monkeys, which was a common thing to do at that time. Jews are still called monkeys in certain places, right? People have to stand up while still maintaining their political differences.
Several 100,000 people died. What made this war such a deadly war?
It's extraordinary how many people died, more than 500,000. And this was without a single automatic rifle, without a single bomb. It was mostly in hand-to-hand combat, which is to say that these 600,000 or so people who died, they died where the person who killed them was standing within a few feet of them. And that's really hard. Most of the killing that happens in wars today is actually from a distance. It's by a drone, it's by a bomb, it's by a rocket, or by an automatic weapon. And just to make this even more focused, to this day, the deadliest day in American history was during the Civil War. September 1862 at Antietam, more than 22,000 Americans killed one another hand to hand. There hasn't been a day that deadly in American history since then. That's amazing considering the technological changes.
What was in the mind of those soldiers on each side? Was there conviction for ideas? Did they hate the other side?
I think actually they were fighting out of fear. What we know from reading their letters, what we know from the accounts, is that yes, they're ideas that are promoted to them to get them to the battlefield. They believe in what they're doing. But here it's the same as World War I, and I think the Civil War and World War I are very similar as wars. You are in these horrible conditions, you're attacked, and you have the chance to either kill the other side and live or die. And you fight to live, and you fight to save the people next to you. What is true about war, what is both good and dangerous about it, is you form an almost unparalleled bond with those on your side. This is the men under arms scenario, right? And that's where the killing goes. And it's a civil war, which means sometimes it's brother against brother, quite literally. And what it teaches us is how human beings can be put into fighting and will commit enormous damage. And that's why this happens. It goes on for 4 years.
In just the extensive research you've done on this war for this book, what are some of the worst and some of the best aspects of human nature that you found? Like you said, brother against brother. That's pretty powerful.
They're both, right? So the level of violence that human beings are capable of, how long they're able to sustain it. The Confederacy should not have lasted in this war as long as it did. By the end, I mean, they're starving and they keep fighting. So the resilience in war of societies and the power of hate to move people. What are the bright sides? You see in Lincoln and Grant, who I talk about a lot in the book as well, Ulysses Grant, you see the ability of empathetic figures to still rise above this in spite of all the horror. Lincoln went to visit more soldiers in war than any president ever has, often at personal peril because he was close to the lines. And he connected. It wasn't propaganda. There weren't always reporters following him. He was able to build empathy in this context. And I think, as I said, war, as horrible as it is, often gives opportunities to certain groups. So African Americans, former slaves, are able to prove themselves as citizens. Jews did this in enormous number in World War II. Henry Kissinger, who I wrote about before, he really only gets recognized as an American. He's a German-Jewish immigrant. He's seen as an American because of his service in World War II. So the bright side of this is that often in the case of war, on your own side, you will let go of some of your prejudices. Ulysses Grant has a total transformation. He goes into the Civil War an anti-Semite and a racist. he comes out with actually very enlightened views because he sees what Jewish